In today's video, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be sharing a personal story of mine of how in 2020 went from going to Worlds in 2019 to being the OPL champion in the first split of the OPL to being relegated in the summer split of PCS 2020. And this is the story of Resurgence's summer split and how I was responsible for this monstrosity. See the guy in the suit on the bottom left of your screen? That is me. And to give you guys an overview, this has kind of been my journey coaching so far. I started as an amateur coaching in the Legend circuit and as in the GPL, working with semi-pro slash amateur teams during the period. I picked up 2 domestic titles back then, and that will be relevant for later part of the story, because this is me returning to my home country of Singapore during the COVID period and working with some of these players that I have a history with. Over the last 3 years, I've had a fairly successful career, coming in first place in the VCS in 2018 spring, going to MSI, making the round of 6, before I went to Europe and helped the Spice Vipers win the SLO in the spring split of 2019, and most recently in 2020 helping Legacy win the OPL Split 1. Resurgence was the latest chapter, and unfortunately, it doesn't follow the record. We finished 10th place in the PCS with an overall record of 3 wins and 15 losses. Our overall scrim record was rather abysmal. I'm not one for counting scrim bugs, but this is definitely something that we could have been keeping in mind, and I think it's relevant in framing where this team stands overall. We weren't just losing scrims, we were getting absolutely dominated by the last place LGL team and access that we scrimmed. The VCS team of OPG. Even while we were preparing for relegations, we were getting absolutely crushed by the 2nd Division Vietnamese teams in scrims. As of 8 September 2020, we got relegated by an amateur team. And I can safely say that in the year 2020, this is the worst professional team. Losing to amateurs, getting dominated by Division 2 teams, and having an abysmal win rate overall. How did this happen? Is a question that I had at the end of it all. And to a certain degree, did I make this team worse? Now buckle in as I share with you the journey of what happened in Resurgence's summer split of 2020. Our story actually starts in the spring split of 2020, where there was an open call for coaches in the new PCS. So for those of you who haven't been following what's been happening, the LMS was no more. They merged the LST, which is the Southeast Asian region, and the Taiwanese region of the LMS into the PCS. Now there were 10 teams, and there was a call for teams to apply. Resurgence was one of the last teams to be accepted, and upon being accepted, they did an open call for coaches. Looking for a job at a point of time, and seeing a opening in my home country of Singapore, I sent in my application. I went to there, I did a long interview process with them, but ultimately I was rejected by them. I was told that they disliked my personality and found me arrogant. Meanwhile, I went on to win the OPL with Legacy. Well, they finished in 10th place with a win record of 5 wins and 13 losses. The plan for me initially was to work in the minor region for half a year, make it to the mid-season invitational, have a decent showing there, and then once again throw my hat in the ring to perhaps find a team for the summer split. However, that plan was put on hold due to COVID-19, cancelling MSI, and effectively my plans for the rest of the year as well. So this led me to find a job in summer 2020 in the only place where I could coach a team in a physical setting, with Resurgence. Fortunately for me, at that point of time, I published my book, and one of the managers in Resurgence had read it. He claimed to be a fan, and learned quite a fair bit of the sharings that I had within the book, and decided to approach me once again for the summer project. What they told me was that we had a strong culture coach in spring that allowed the team to believe that they could win. But what they wanted to bring on was someone who could elevate the gameplay or the level of gameplay for the summer split. So why did I join RSG? I had the option of sitting things out, and in spring, one of the reasons why they felt I was so arrogant was that I directly told them that there was a very legitimate career risk of me joining this team and us not having the best standings and then having a very negative impact on my career moving forward. However, I had publicly committed to helping Singaporean League of Legends players in any way I possibly could. And now that Singaporean organization featuring Singaporean players has come about asking for my help, it would be rather difficult for me to turn them down. On top of that, I felt indebted to two of the players, namely Shinsekai and Maxi, for helping me in my career thus far. The two domestic titles that I won was actually with Shinsekai in 2015, with Team Nanzone, and with Maxi on Team Vestigio in 2016. Raven was the third Singaporean player that the roster featured, and I had not much prior experience working with him. However, there was a storied history, especially with Shinsekai, being somebody that I brought over to Taiwan during my debut split as a coach to perhaps be a substitute for the top lane. However, that didn't really work out, and I was actually told that Shinsekai did express to the management that if this was going to be his last split, he would want Jensen, which is myself, to be his coach. With all that said, it was hard to turn this down. There was a very strong emotional appeal, and most of all, I was coming off an amazing high. At the end of 2019, I was at Worlds. 2018, I was able to bench a star import player, help a player transition from top lane to mid lane successfully, and have one of the more dominant teams in the OPL. I felt invincible. And perhaps that's why I decided to take on the job. It was definitely an enormous task, and at a point of time, I felt that I was up to the enormous task at hand. Now, the rest of the roster was not signed for the rest of the year at that point of time, but to pick up Epic, who came on in the second half of the spring split, and he was largely responsible for Resurgence's 5-game winning streak in the second half of spring, seemed like an easy way to do things. He had a prior working relationship with the rest of the team, and he seemed like a rather smart jungler. When I interviewed the players and the thoughts of Epic, they felt that he was smart about parting, he generally had a solid idea of how to play the game, and he was mechanically sound. Something that most of the other options, in terms of the potential prospects for the jungle position, didn't necessarily have. However, for the support position, there were certain difficulties in contending with Dennis, due to the challenges presented by COVID-19. Dennis was the resident bot one trick who played support for the team in the spring split, and thus we had to trial for new supports. The way I did it was I got the players to prepare 3 champions. In the first game, they will play a Trash or Nautilus game, and the second game, I'll let them play a Yumi game, and the third game, I would let them pick a comfort champ of their choice. As to when we will be picking this in the draft phase, I will let the players decide that. The players would then be evaluated on their ability to communicate with the rest of the team, their habits in lane in summoner's time, the receptiveness to its feedback, and of course the cost of acquiring such a player based on their asking price, their location. At a point of time, we were also looking at the possibility of, say, if COVID restrictions would be lifted halfway through the split, could we bring them into the country itself, and also the languages spoken. At this point of time, Resurgence was a mixed language team, having a mix of Chinese and English being used to communicate during the game itself. And of course, mechanical competency in the way they executed the learning phase was something that I was looking at as well. Unfortunately, of all the supports that we trialed, I believe that we trialed close to 6 supports. None of them could play Yumi. Every single time we went for the Yumi game, no one could successfully execute the cat, which was proving to be quite a menace in the meta at that point of time. At the end of the day, based on his Trash and Nautilus performance, we felt that Kusuo was the best match. And despite negative recommendations from not only my past, say, interactions with his other teammates, and based on what the other Singaporean players said, simply because he was able to speak both Chinese and English fluently, and he was located within Singapore itself, and wouldn't cost much. This seemed to be the deciding factor, as the other options we were looking at were not particularly high in skill, and I felt that regardless of whichever support that we picked up, there would be a long list of things that I would have to work with them. So going for a local player would seem like the best option. Now that we had the roster decided, there was a 4-week build up to the PCS itself, and I was told by the organization at this point of time that the goal was to make worlds, and thus I decided to teach them all 3 styles in which that we can play the game, so that we could have a overall more holistic approach. And the idea is that there's somewhat of a rock paper scissors in terms of the meta, where you could say that big compositions are good against kite compositions, it's good against split pushing 1-2-1 compositions. So I'll express it this way: you can play on 2 lanes, you can play on 3 lanes, you can play on 1 lane, right? 2-lane teams are good against 3-lane teams, 3-lane teams are good against 1-lane teams, and 1-lane teams are good against 2-lane teams. And of course, this is an oversimplification of things, but there are 3 distinct styles in which that you can approach the mid game and gear your drafts towards in League of Legends. And if you really want to be a top team that can adapt towards things, and if the goal was to win the PCS, you need to have a certain proficiency in all 3 so that you are able to adapt to your opponents, and you need the ability to specialize to develop a unique edge in one of these ideas. So the plan here was to spend 3 weeks, 1 week on each style. They kind of like do a diagnostic to see what the players had a natural feel for based on their champion pools, and what were they capable of, what seemed more natural for them to execute on. And after, we would focus on the main style to approach the meta with. And throughout this entire time, we will be conducting player diagnostics to develop an individual, say, SWOT analysis. So SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They kind of help them identify, it's kind of where are we now, where do we want to be, and what are the things that we need to do to get there. And this also kind of forms the laundry list, which is the to-do list and things that list of things that we need to learn or need to solve or need to accomplish in order to achieve our goal of making worlds. Now, with the entire way this entire thing is set up, we know very clearly that not only did we not make worlds, we kind of achieved the opposite result. And we'll continue to explore what happened, right? So pick neutral team fight and 1-3-1 kite, right? So the first one is to play pick compositions, where what you want to do is that you want to create a tempo lead via side lane in the early game. You want to play for a complete or hover rotation. Now, pardon the technical jargon and all of this, of 2 lanes. And the thing about pick compositions was that the PCS teams, they love to play 1-3-1 kite. So, like I said, right, there's a rock, paper, scissors kind of thing going on, and 2 lanes is good against 3 lanes. So, if we were to learn pick compositions, this creates an aggressive angle over the PCS killing meta, right? But the drawback to playing pick compositions is that it's a type of play style that is very reliant on you catching waves, being very disciplined around your resets, and maintaining the tempo lead. So, one mistake, and if you lose the tempo lead, you can actually struggle to get them back against a lot of other team compositions. So when you go for such a playstyle, your margin for error is much higher. Our first week we went in, and naturally with this higher margin for error, we lost almost every single game, right? We ended the first week of scrims with 1 win and 16 losses. We lost to practically everybody we scrimmed against. And in the second week, we focused on neutral team comps, or as I call it, all-in style team comps, right? And what you want to do in this style of team compositions, think Aatrox, think Kai'Sa, think these type of maybe say on Oriana, and you want to go for a team fighting AD carry with the likes of say a Tristana, and you want to achieve the power spikes, group and play for the river control the chokes, and then secure multiple neutral objectives for you to win the game, be it stacking for dragons within the Season 10 meta, or going for the Baron neutral objective itself. Most of the PCS teams played with the style, right? They'll just play, they'll farm, they hit their power spikes, they group, and they'll team fight. It's a very straightforward way, and I think that this is the most general way that people kind of understand the game. And the drawback of this, of course, is that if I were to look at my players, generally they were in Diamond 3, Diamond 2, this doesn't give us an edge over the rest of the field. And on top of that, if I were to see what are the champions that my players like to play, Shin Sakai preferred to play split pushers, mid lane preferred to play assassins, right? If you wanted to play this type of team style, you needed a team fighting AD carry. You needed a jungler that can play a much more supportive role, and you needed a top laner who could play the tank role, right? Either the jungler or the top lane has to play a tank role, and then the mid lane has to play a control mage. And this is something that our players wasn't the most proficient in. They preferred to play the likes of Jax in the top lane, the likes of Camille in the top lane, and while mid lane he was open to the ideas of playing tanks like the Set, like the Galio. He's known for his LeBlanc play, his Diana play, and getting the counter picks from mid lane as well. Like they had a lot of success playing Kiana in Spring Split. But naturally, with a lower margin for error, there was a uptick in Scrim performance, and we won a few more of our games, right? So we went 4 wins and 21 losses. It's not the best record either, but it's still more wins on the table, and that gave us a better idea of what was working and what wasn't, right? The third week we spent it playing 1-3-1 Kite, and the thing about playing a Kite kind of play style, if you have solid laners and if your laners do not give up leads, you're not susceptible to losing lane, this is actually the simplest and most effective way to win games of League of Legends, right? Because you're just going to farm and you force the owners on your opponents to attack the game. But at a higher level of League of Legends, what you need to be able to do is that you need to be able to react accordingly to figure out in which situations are you able to match your opponent on weak side, and in which situations do you say that, okay, we do not win this fight, or there's this particular setup, there's these cooldowns available, and we have to play for the cross map instead. And you need to be able to kind of read your opponents in advance. You kind of need to read your opponents in advance and be able to counteract that accordingly. And I think that the biggest challenge of playing such a style is that if you have weak players, it is very easy to get snowballed on from a weak laning phase, right? Like if you're going to play the likes of an Astro, yes, it's a fairly okay skilling style champion, and it's what people were saying is that it's a good answer to Aphelios. But if you're just getting dived by Aphelios because say you made a trading mistake at level 2 in lane, and then now the opponent jungle is parting to its bot side, that doesn't really matter, right? You don't get the power spikes for you to really take over the game if you're scaling. And like once again, Yuumi was a very big part of playing such a composition. We tried a full week of playing for scaling, to play for Kite, to play for the 1-3-1 split push style, and this didn't really work out, right? We went in there, we got smashed in every game, and there wasn't really much for me to cover in the mid game, as not only were we just losing, we were just getting absolutely steamrolled. There were 3 champions in general that I think that throughout the entire season, every time we saw the opponents pick up these champions, we just felt that we were not able to win, right? Renekton was one of them, Pantheon was another, be it in mid, be it in support, and the third one was Kalista. Whenever we saw these champions in the opponent team, we just got snowballed on. And that was the level of play that we were kind of dealing with here. So what I'm doing at the same time is that I'm evaluating how far are we in terms of as a coach. I'm evaluating how far are we from, say, I won't say mastering, but having a good grasp, right? So I'm recording down these mistakes. I have a good idea of what I want to be saying, right? So are we communicating the right things? Are these concepts of saying like understanding tempo? When do we solve for Rift Herald? How do we control the chokes on neutral objective team fights? Or when do we play for cross map? Or how do we read the opponent's game plan? Or how do we place our vision early to defend, say, level 2 gangs, to defend from the 3 camp in the gang bot? Or the two full clears into get 6 and team fight with TP on bot lane, right? And based on these style of things, my assessment was that big compositions, and I think that this is something that the team agreed with as well at this point of time, was the closest, that we were the closest to its getting. Because we would play the stack and divers at the side lane, and we were able to get leads off that, but the high amount of losses came from the high margin of error rather than our inability to execute the team composition. So we went in for the 4th week, and we scored similar to what we were getting in week 2, 4 wins and 21 losses. Once again, there's still a very, very negative win rate, right? And I think that these style of things should have been red flags. But at this point of time, I'm not focused on counting the scrim bugs. My entire focus was how do we develop the team to a point where we can actually start winning games. So we decided to focus the main approach that the team had for the PCS to be playing this pick style, very similar to how G2 was playing, to how some of the LPL teams are playing. And so being as the PCS, the first week we played against Machi, we played against Snowboy, we played against Pajari Dragons, and knowing that we wanted to have a pick style in mind, I knew that we had to do more than just simply pick champions, right? Because I knew that from the scrims that laning was a big concern for us, and I wouldn't just be able to pick the regular matchups and exchange 50-50s with the opponents. We needed to pick things that could give us a clear advantage so that we could have a method, an edge in draft. So for Machi, what we did was that we had a Nocturne strategy prepared where we wanted to flex Nocturne between mid and jungle, and we saw Mission's champion pool. This guy was playing Twisted Fate, this guy was playing Syndra, this guy plays Oriana, Corki Erzia, right? All of these champions, they don't really like to play against Nocturne, so we felt that we wanted to go for a Nocturne pick. And it didn't really work out because we got invaded on early, and I think Epic, he didn't really respond too well to the invade. This is something that actually went through with him as well, right? Like you can actually just do your wolves and then you full clear towards the bottom side. So if you're blue, you full clear towards your bottom side, then you just come back out and then you take a Grom and you full clear again, and then you should be able to be fairly healthy on levels. But he saw the opponent invade, he got the wolves and he could have just full cleared, but he went to counter invade on the opponent side of the map, and then we lost the skirmish there, and from there he was just very, very far behind in the game. With the Nocturne being such a key part of the strategy, if you fall that far behind, it's very difficult for you to come back. Right? Against Nova, once again we had a prepared strategy, right? So this is all about executing for pick compositions, and the thing about going for a lane swap strategy is that it immediately creates a tempo lead for you if you are able to execute it correctly. And why we decided to go for the lane swap against Nova was that their top laner Rocky is somebody who exclusively played carry champions. So this was a strategy that I went in there, I showed the team the VODs, and I have a very long presentation, not say very long, but I have the detailed presentation of what are the objectives of a lane swap and how you execute it. The team was able to learn it. But we lost this game due to a few fundamental mistakes, right? The first one was our inability to judge when do we pull the trigger to dive somebody. And the short answer for that is that you only go for the dive if they are touching the wave, right? Or else you just play to zone them from the EXP and you don't chase them too deep in. And the other concept was how do you control strong side and weak side, right? This is a very basic fundamental thing, and our support Kusuo at this point of time, this was where the red flag started to appear. So prior to this, Kusuo was not necessarily the most cooperative person, and he was a perpetual whiner of sorts. He always going there, he's always complaining, and his communication style was rather negative in general. But this is the first game where the red flag really became very obvious, where he makes a mistake and he blames it on somebody else instead within this game itself. And I'll elaborate this a little bit more in detail, but to move on to the third game, where we score our first win of the season with a MVP performance from Raven on Syndra, where we fell behind early, right? This is a game where Pajari Dragons, they actually got Ocean Soul against us, but we were able to turn things around after the Syndra got a very good pick on the opponent's LeBlanc, and we were able to just use the macro concepts that we were learning and control the map from there, which allows us to score our first win. So my notes from the first week was that it actually wasn't just Kusuo, right? That Kusuo was a very big part of that blame. But in reflection upon this, the blame culture was most noticeable with Kusuo. But across the rest of the team, I think there was a certain lack of receptiveness to his criticism across the board, where the players were not good at trying to figure out the question when they were faced with a mistake is not how can I do this better, but their response would always be a very negative one, and they'll take it in a very personal sense. And as a defense mechanism, I would guess that's why they would try to push it off to other people. The other thing that appeared within this week itself is that communication on stage was rather panicked, with people just asking questions all over the place, and this results in a lot of split fights. And I think that, like I said, Kuso started a very serious attitude issues, right? And we'll cover that later on as well, because at the end of the first week we talk about Senna Wukong, and that's something that we wanted to prepare for the next weeks as well. As to why we couldn't play Wukong, the HK game, right? We played the Cho'Gath mid strategy, and I think that this is a game that we got certain amount of leads, and there was a very big red flag once again once I'm revisiting this, where top lane he plays Volibear into Lucian, and he knows that in this type of matchup he's going to need jungler assistance, right? But he doesn't communicate that with the jungler, and it comes out as in Chinese we have this saying called "ma hou pao," which is it's a reference to the Chinese chess, where or to simply explain is to say, in hindsight, right? In hindsight, it's very easy to say that, oh, actually, why didn't my jungler know that he has to path up the cover for me? But at the start of the game, he says that he's going to be okay in the matchup, but he's not. So he gets solo killed by the Lucian, and the top lane becomes very difficult to play from there. And some of the mid-game team fights, I guess there's some skill issues that we could be looking at, but definitely there is a red flag in terms of how the top laner is communicating with the jungler. The second game of the week we play against J Team is one of the top teams in the league, and the game is, honestly speaking, when I rewatched it again at the end of the season, I thought it was quite close in terms of how we were setting things up. We went kind of even lane. The Kalista was getting a lead against the Astro, but it just came down to a simple issue of hitting your skills in team fights, right? And this is one of the games I actually felt that this is where we simply lost from skill difference in team fights. There's this fight around the Rift Herald. We set up for the Rift Herald. We control the choke point. The opponent walks into the choke. The trash misses the hook, misses the flay, and the rest of the team is not in position to follow up on that. And I do believe there's a Wukong in the game, and he has a MVP performance. My notes from week 2 was that top lane did not communicate what he needed from the jungle versus HKA, and it was very important to note there was a lot of frustration in scrims, because bot lane in this week, in this build up in scrims, they were constantly losing 2v2 on the bottom side of the map. So mechanically, in the way that they were executing, we were playing against these Vietnamese teams, and the Vietnamese teams, they're very, very aggressive around the bottom side of the map. And on bot lane, they would always have split calls, right? Like, you always need to maintain the line, and the AD carry would step up, the support would be pulling back. Epic would be asking our bot lane to push so that he could secure the bot side scuttle crab, but bot lane couldn't do it because Kuso would not he just wouldn't be on the same page with the rest of the team, right? And I think that while he was the easy person to play, I think there was also some problems in terms of how Max C, the AD carry, was responding to all of these issues as well, where what he is saying is that whenever I pointed on the issue with the bot lane, he's always but not me. I mean, that's how us Singaporeans we express in our slang, right? So he would generally say that, oh, I've done my part already, I've done all I can, I'm already hitting the minions, it's not my fault, right? So this is one of the very big pain points that we had. At the end of week 1, I assigned them the task to play Senna and Wukong and get a practice, and I could say that it's definitely my fault, right, for not putting more effort in monitoring the solo queue. And at the end of the day, the number of solo queue games played was 1. And all of this, when I highlighted Kusuo's attitude issues, was that he was literally phoning it in, because in Singapore, what you can do is that you go to see a doctor, and then the doctor can grant you a medical certificate to say that you're not fit to go to work. And during the COVID period, the amount of days that you get off when you go and take a medical certificate is drastically increased. Now, of course, I'm somebody who can give him the benefit of the doubt, but from what I saw and from what I heard later, is that he simply didn't want to travel to the office to attend training. And he was saying that he had very serious, he was claiming that he had very serious migraines, and therefore he didn't want to train, and working with him in general was not a very pleasant experience. He's a type of player where I'm there, the scrim set's over, I'm doing the debrief, we're doing some problem solving, right? And he's there rushing me, and he's there saying, oh, are you done? Are you finished? Could you be done faster? And his feedback for one of his teammates when we had a team feedback session was that, I think that you should talk less, that you should talk less crap, and so that we can finish work for the day. So to me, it felt that this was a player that was always rushing off to go and do other things. And what I'm told later on is that it's because he was going to play Valorant, or I do believe Valorant was released somewhere during this period as well. So he was trying to rush off to play Valorant with his friends. So what we did at a point of time, however, was that we conducted a performance review. And when we presented it to Kuso, the performance review, which is where I look at the various domains, right? This is where you're lacking in knowledge, and I present the laundry list to you and say that within this next week, we're going to be monitoring these few key indicators, these few key metrics, and based on your ability to execute these things or to hit these goals, we will replace you if you cannot hit these goals, right? It's a form of letting a player know that, okay, you've messed up and this is what you need to do to keep your spot on the team. Not playing solo queue was one of it. We asked him to play more solo queue. He was full of excuses once again, and he had a very negative reaction. At the end of everything, he said, "Oh, if you guys have a better replacement, then please go ahead and replace me." And when a player tells me that, he's gone, right? Because to me, he felt that he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to put in the work and effort to change things on his own end as well. So enter RSG Boxer, who continued to be a support for the rest of the split. And how we got to know him was that he was an acquaintance of Epic's, right? You couldn't find any video material of him in the past because he's a complete rookie. And what I liked about him, unlike the other supports that I tried, was that this was a player who was very eager to learn. Because once we got in contact with him, he was talking to me quite a fair bit. He would always be up early in the mornings. I'm somebody who during the seasons practically eats, sleeps, and breathes League of Legends. Right? I'll watch players solo queue until late at night. I'll wake up in the morning and watch VODs to figure out what's been happening all around the world. And this is somebody who would just pop into the Discord, ask me questions, like go through all the coaching material that I've been teaching with the rest of the players. And he definitely had the hunger to improve. And on top of that, through the conversations that I had with him, I felt that this is a player who had a decent mind for the game, where he doesn't think about things just in a very simplistic manner of, yeah, this champion beats this champion, but rather what are the intricacies of the matchup and why is this champion effective against this other champion instead. Trash and Northless, so like all the supports that we had, nobody could play Yuumi, right? Nobody could play Yuumi. But Trash and Northless, once again, he showed decent amounts of proficiency on these two. Leona was another champion that he had a lot of comfort on as well. But regardless to say, when we're moving into week 3, we were not sure what the status of bot lane was going to be looking like. So we still wanted to play towards a pick style of gameplay, and we decided to play to get the tempo lead via the top lane in the early game in week 3. So this brings us once again to match day, right? In week 3, we played against HQ Esports Club as well as Alpha. HQ, one of the top teams in the region. Alpha, middle of the pack to maybe say middle to bottom tier team. Against HQ, I think that once again, red flags popping up, right? We spelled out, from my perspective, I felt that I spelled out the game plan very clearly, but somehow when we go into draft, I asked Shinsekai, right, do we need to ban Mordekaiser? Because from my perspective, that's a champion that's very difficult to attack in general. The moment he hits level 6, he always can just pop somebody into the death realm under the turret, and he's got the W as well. It's generally difficult to dive him. And he says that he is okay with opening Mordekaiser because he can play Kill into it. And while yes, Kill does allow us to play 1-3-1 with TF, which is what we play against HQ Esports Club, that's not what we were trying to achieve in the draft, but we were playing to play for a second dive on the top side of the map. So we give him the counter pick in the scenario, and it doesn't achieve, doesn't fulfill the criteria of what we want to do in draft. Against Alpha, this game was a fiesta, right? I think that Alpha's a team that plays very heavily through mid jungle. They are a reluctantly type of team where what they want to do is they want to just smash you in the early game so hard that they can snowball from there. We got smashed. We got smashed really hard. But Epic had a very good Baron steal, which allowed us to come back into the game to the point where we had the Baron buff and we're actually pushing for a Nexus. But there's a throw there where the Astro uses the Essence shift forward into the Irelia and he just gets one shot. So we're on the Nexus, we were 4v2, we went in, we flashed in, we killed the Aphelios. but the literally just response. Sorry, so it was a 5v3 or something along those lines, and the AD carry makes a crucial mistake. We throw it, but the game is still even. After that, Shinsekai makes another big mistake. The team tells him not to walk to the river. We are 5 men on top of the map. He just goes and explores the river randomly, gets caught out, and the game is instantly lost from there. What's interesting to note is that there's some things that happen in terms of interactions between the team. The first is that Epic gave me feedback that although we were playing this big style, right, and it has a high margin for error, despite us getting closer and closer, we're in scrims, we're getting games where we were taking on inhibitors, we're getting games where we would take the second Rift Herald and we would come close, right? We would come close, we would take like 6k, 7k goal leads on our opponents. But Epic felt that we were very far from winning with the big style of gameplay because he felt that ultimately we would need to be able to contest a dragon at some point of time, and these are the teams they were playing these style team compositions that would just let them be able to get the soul and then threaten Elder subsequently. Shinsekai was also very mad at the team because he felt that the team's response to the kill game, as well as the he played Jace against Alpha, was that they lost confidence in his ability to carry, right? And in particular, the team had a lot of comments about his decision not to play Wukong, the fact that he was trying to prepare all these other champions into Wukong instead, and Wukong and Akali became very big pain points for the team. Akali was one of his favorite champions. He enjoyed playing Akali a lot. He was spamming the champion in solo queue, but whenever we would bring up, say, playing Akali, he had my trust in his ability to execute a champion, and that's the way I work as a coach. If the player is putting in the games in solo queue and he tells me that he's confident in the champion, I will let him go for it, right? I'll ask him, does this fulfill what we're trying to do? And if his answer to that is yes, then I'm not going to second guess his judgment with regards to that. But that's not what the rest of the team did. The rest of the team felt that at this point in time we were losing so much. So the bot lane wanted, the AD carry in particular, wanted us to play towards the bottom side of the map once again. And I think that from the game from Alpha, things were starting to come together, both in-game and out of game, where it showed that this team had a very weak mental fortitude in general. Things didn't go their way, people would start to tilt, communication would break down, and after every game, after every scrim, it was always this constant blame game of, oh, it wasn't my fault, this guy told me this, we should have done this instead, or why didn't this person tell me this, or why didn't this person do that instead, or this is my idea of how I want to play the game, and I don't want to care about what other people are doing, right? This was the type of language that I was dealing with in general, where people was just shutting off from one another. Week 4 rolls around, and we were preparing Ashe. So after week 3, bot lane requests, okay, we play for bot lane, right? And Ashe was a very big part of the meta. I do believe that this is the week where approach velocity Ashe was disabled, but simply because of her ability to just bully people out with a range in lane. You could actually be very good at using Ashe to take down bullies in the game itself. And we practiced both sides of the matchup because everybody was practicing Ashe at this point of time. And we went in there against Liab, right? Liab is a Philippines team, and they are the other team that ended up having to play relegations as well alongside us, and they finished in 9th place. So for the Singaporean players, they saw it as a very big point of pride that they have to beat the Philippines team, because deep in their hearts they thought of themselves as better than these players. So they felt that there was a lot of personal stake in this, and they wanted to win it. But yet that didn't really translate into the type of work they were putting to get it done. And when we saw on the day itself, we knew that Liab, this is a team that was playing Ashe even before it was very popular in the meta. And on the day of PCS itself, right, everybody played Ashe versus Ezreal. And Ashe lost, I believe, every single game, every single encounter, simply because you're playing a pick-based sample game with Ashe. You're playing an immobile AD carry, which is very punishable by a lot of other champions. And such a playstyle has a very high margin for error. So simply put, you Ashe, you lose, right? If you haven't mastered the playstyle yet, don't be going for this champion. And I pointed out to the team in our prep for it. And at first, when I approached the Singaporeans about it, they're quite agreeable. They say, okay, this makes sense, right? But then Epic says that I want to play Kindred in this game. If you guys pick Ashe, you guys can guarantee me the bot push. And if you guys can guarantee me the bot push, I should be able to clear the jungle, invade the opponent, and create leads through counter jungling as Kindred. So Epic made a promise that he would carry if we pick the Ashe. And upon hearing that, the rest of the team was so quick to throw out all the rationalization that we were doing and say that, okay, this person has said that he's going to carry, let's just go with that, right? And if anything happens, then okay, we'll blame him because he promised that he's going to carry, but that didn't happen. So we pick Ashe. There's a 5-man fight on the bottom side of the map, and I do believe there's some small mistake before that allowed for that to happen, and we lost the game because of that, right? Oh, I don't remember what happens now, right? There's a rotation from bot to mid to control the river. Ashe overextends too much. He gets TP'd on. We lose the fight bot, and we are not able to get a tempo lead via the Ashe, and from there we lose the game. The last opponent for week 4 is PSG Talon. They were the Spring Split champions, and we went for a Zig strategy as our answer to the Ashe meta. And unfortunately, this game, I think the individual skill gap was very clear. Like, we were just simply losing in every single lane, and there were some of the fights that it just simply comes down to us not hitting our abilities and them getting a lot more out of the champions. So this is another games where I wouldn't say this one was close, right? But this one was very clearly that their players were better than ours, and they were able to execute and make use of those advantages accordingly. And once again, struggles around playing Ashe type of playstyles, right? Our bot lane had problems in winning the 2v2. Not just like by win, I don't mean being able to solo kill the opponents, right? It's just in terms of like being able to secure the push and secure the bot side's got a crap. And it was a very, very big red flag that the team chose to blame the loss on Epic the moment he claimed that he would carry versus Liam, and they were so happy to hand off responsibility towards him. At this point of time, we were 1-8 in the PCS. Right? We held an emergency meeting, and this is our Scrim records so far. 3-14 in the second week, 3-17, then 3-22. At this point of time, our Scrim record is abysmal. It's 14%, right? And the difficult thing here is that when I reflect on what Epic is saying, at this point of time, we should have at least started winning things. If we are going to say that we're going to take the first half, if we are going to take the first half of the PCS as a extended off-season of sorts for us to develop team understanding because there's a new coach, there's a new system coming in for summer split, then fine. But at this point of time, we should have seen a much larger increase that matches our progress. But right now, we're only winning 14.5% of scrims, and although scrim bugs don't really matter, from a psychological standpoint, it's affecting the players' confidence in terms of getting data, in terms of what's working and what's not just in a sense of just saying, okay, in this game we made less mistakes, in this other game we made more mistakes, but in terms of our ability to simply close out the game and destroy the opponent's nexus. Such a win rate in scrims is a huge red flag. The problem diagnosis was that the team was unable to execute on the cheese strats prescribed to them, right? I looked at it, I felt that I was throwing my playbook and the sink at them. The Nocturne strategy, the lane swap, the Cho'Gath in the mid lane, these were all things that I used in other regions. I talked to other coaches as well, and I've always scored wins off of these type of strategies thus far. But so far, with this team, we have not been able to execute on it. The team had a very clear over-reliance on the coach for problem solving. When we talked to the players and we asked them, okay, what do you think the problem is here? And they said that, okay, most of the time they said that they're not happy with the way that another player was doing things. But their general attitude towards this was that they didn't feel empowered, or they felt that it wasn't their place to go and criticize their teammates, feeling that it should be the coach who was responsible to do that. Now, unlike most of the other major regional organizations, the coaching staff that we had was very, very small. It was only myself and Omo, or as I call him, Leonard, and it's just two people just watching over everything, right? I put Leonard in charge of handling mid and jungle issues. I was looking at the bot lane AD and support, and Shin Sakai said that he didn't take coaching very well, so he requested for him to be left alone. And this was clear, right? Which brings me to the third point of the problem diagnosis, because there's a severe lack of collaboration and teamwork and coming together to form a game plan. And I think that this shows in the breakdown of communication, where top lane needs certain things to achieve his a stable lane state, and he's not communicating that with the jungler and just simply saying that, oh, the jungler should know this, right? This shows in the draft, where we communicate a game plan and everybody's just kind of hands off, right? They're not coming together and saying that, okay, this is how I want to contribute to this game plan. And they just say that, okay, I've got counter pick here, I'm just going to counter pick for myself and my understanding of what I want to do in this game, instead of what does the team want to do for this game. Perhaps it was my fault in coming over and showing them a little too much, making them a little bit too confident in the coach's ability to solve things. Because most of the time, I think in a professional League of Legends team, players need to be able to solve problems with one another, and the coach comes in as a facilitator to help that, be it through the form of providing structure or through the form of suggestions or as a sounding board of sorts to help them explore different ideas in the iteration process. So the solution that we proposed was that we were going to foster player meetings, get the players to sit down for a few hours, sort things out, collaborate, and propose a coherent team style and approach as to how we were going to play for week 5. What I told them was that the coaching staff for week 5, we're going to be hands off. We're not going to be reviewing things with you. We're not going to go off our way to say that, okay, go watch these games, go prepare these things, go and figure out how to play these champions. You guys tell us what you guys want to play. After you guys, as a team of 5, have decided what is the strategy going to be for week 5. I remember the scene, right? Because we left them to their own devices. We went down. I had dinner with the management and coaching staff for a few hours, and then I do believe the players got their own food to eat and have this discussion as well, right? And do note that this entire time, right, everything is online for the 2 Hong Kong players. So they were all on Discord. They were using the webcams and they're having a discussion. When I went back up, I was very disappointed. I saw this written on the whiteboard. They say that, okay, we come to the conclusion, we know what we're going to do for week 5. They wrote 3 things on the whiteboard. And this is going to be very, very funny. But when I saw it, I was beyond disbelief. After we sat them down for I think it was a good 1 hour or 2 hours. I don't recall how long it was, right? But it was a significant amount of time. But they sat down there, they talked about things, and they were debating things. There was vigorous debate. Their conclusion as to what they were going to do for week 5 was to 1, play better, 2, work harder, and worst of all, is to play Jensen's style. When I looked at it, I felt it was so incredulous. My first question to them was, what is Jensen's style? Right. In my history coaching, I haven't had a very clearly defined play style. What I've taught them is a system of how to think about the game, where you play on 1 lane, where you play on 2 lanes, or where you play on 3 lanes, right? I mean, I would imagine that they are kind of like saying play for 2 lanes, play the cross map, don't play for the neutral objectives and stuff like that, which is some of the solutions that we had based on the drafts that we came up with. But when I saw that, they want to play my style, it just felt so confusing to me. When I was in the VCS, when I was coaching EVOS, we played a 1-3-1 style. When I was with Legacy, we did have a very good grasp of all 3 styles. Although we did end up playing 2, it was 1-3-1. And when I was coaching the LMS, there was the Ash meta, we were playing very well on 2 lanes as well. So when they said play towards Jensen's style, I didn't really know what they were going for. And when I asked them about it, I said, we're just going to follow what the coach says. And this is when I knew that we just wasted this entire meeting. It was so messed up. So on the next Tuesday, on the next Monday when we came together again for scrims and training, I addressed this and I said that I'm going to be very clear about this, right? If you guys still don't understand what's the purpose of all of this, I want you guys to come up with the strategy, and I'm even going to take it to the step that I'm not going to do the draft for the scrims this week. Whew. The team decided to go for a all-in type of strategy at the end of the day. After I guided them along, helped them go through the process as to how do you design a team composition of sorts. And the screen rate was actually fairly decent, right? For the first time, now that the players have started to take some form of ownership in terms of what they want to do and how they want to execute things, things are looking up a little bit. That weekend we played against the Bajaj Dragons, right? So this is the rematch. This is the team that we beat in the first round. However, there was a lot of poor coordination around fights, right? Which is expected. It's expected. And we were going to see this trend consistently throughout this week where we swap from one playstyle to another, where we're very focused on playing around big compositions. And now we're playing for all entire team compositions. How do you manage the side lanes? How do you manage the tempo on the map? How do you get back tempo if you fall behind on tempo? And most importantly, how do you coordinate team fights? Because if you're going to be a team fighting team, you better be darn good at team fighting. And we weren't there. Our understanding of team fighting wasn't good enough. So we played against Vijaya. The coordination around team fights was poor. And the game is kind of thrown after we overextend mid while we were trying to set the side lane, which goes back to the idea of how do you bridge for the weak side to play for the mid lane prio into the neutral objective. And when playing against Machi, once again, right, I feel that the players were once again checking out. They didn't understand how to draft shade strategy. And in this case, the topic was around the concept of blind pick Astro. I said that I do not want to blind pick Astro because if we pick Astro, then the opponents can pick Kai'Sa, and then we're forced to play the kite side of the matchup, right? But when we know that we don't want to adapt into that, and this is our limitations as a team, because we know that if we play kite, we are going to lose the game. We have zero ability to defend. We have zero ability to defend. We have zero ability to hold down a solid landing phase to tide us over into the late game. We do not want to go for the strategy. The Maxi insists on picking the Astro. Okay, we pick in the Astro. Opponents pick Kai'Sa, and we don't have the winning 5v5 anymore. HK game, I think once again in terms of like the rest of the laundry list in terms of learning how to play this neutral team fight team comps, right? We over prioritized the Rift Harrow. We didn't coordinate our alternate timers for neutral objective team fights, and we over chased past the chokes in the neutral objective fights. Which while we are able to get an early game lead, over prioritizing the Rift Harrow threw the lead away. And there was a big dragon fight where we could have won it if we were more cognizant of what our ultimate timers were. And even then, there were still ways for us to continue to win that fight, but we overchased past the chokes into a position where the DPS could not follow, and we lost the fight at a point of time. Despite them being in control of having a larger say in terms of what we wanted to do, to me, it still seemed like the team was still checked out in terms of taking ownership, right? And it was under Epic's suggestion that the team switch over to playing for neutral objectives. And during this entire week, I have to say I was rather stressed because not only were things not going well, we were having all these problems. Management was also not happy with this very hands-off approach, and they pressured me to take more action as well. Which I eventually had to do a little bit more of, right? Because I remember there was just this story where prior to this week, I would have all my post-Scrim activities planned out for them. Whereas this time, what I'll do is that I will prepare potential activities and I'll give them options. And in this week, the players just simply chose to do solo queue, right? And while they played solo queue, most of the time, for Maxi especially, he would just goof off and he's just at the smoke. He would just go out and smoke for an hour or so, while Boxer, the support, will be waiting for him to do a queue together with him. And with that, at the end of the fifth week, I had enough, right? At the start of things, I felt kind of like adapted to Maxi and Alex, and I think that was why my tolerance for the amount of problems that they had created for the team was abnormally high. And with Maxi continuing to push responsibility away from his mistakes, he had to be benched. And there was some pushback from management because this was the second player that I'll be benching within the split itself. And the replacement that we had was Quake, who I scouted back in 2016 before I went over to Taiwan to coach for my Singaporean team at that point of time, because I knew that this was a very, very hardworking player. Right, at this point of time, it was a very nice window of opportunity because he just finished his mandatory national service, which made it available to play. And this is a player where during his holidays, people will usually go to chill and take a break, right? For this guy, I know he eats, sleeps, and breathes League of Legends, because when he has a holiday, he doesn't go sightseeing. He goes to Korea to grind solo queue. He takes any opportunity he can. He takes his opportunity to go overseas, to fly to Korea, to be in a PC bag, or I think he was like staying in one of like the houses or stuff like that, right? And go there to like try to to grind for masters and stuff like that. And his peak was masters in Korea. However, the rest of the team didn't like Quake a lot, right? They had doubts about his ability, and they were memeing him quite a bit. And at the same time, Epic did tell me that he had another friend from Hong Kong who was peak 900 LP Korea. As much as I would like to say that we trailed this player, to be honest, it was this other player trailing us at this point of time, right? We were 110 at this point of time, and if we lost, I think, 2 more games, we were effectively eliminated from playoffs, and we had 3 big games coming up the next week as well. However, Shinsaka and Boxer, they run it down in both games of the trial, and this AD carry promptly rejects us. At the end of the trial, Boxer is very, very dejected, but he tells me this is the first player to come up in this entire split and give me hope. This is what he tells me. This is what he tells me. I don't need the best AD to be the best bot lane. I will make a bot lane the best by becoming the best support. And this is the moment where it kind of warmed my heart, to be honest. At this point of time, I was extremely down. I was extremely frustrated with the way things were. I was just so sick of the constant, oh, it's not my fault. I did what I could. It's somebody else's responsibility. And this is the first time a player steps up to take agency over something and say, this is my commitment to its improvement. And so we went for Quake for week 6 and week 7, which is effectively the rest of the PCS. Week 6 is basically Hell Week, right? HQ, J-Team, PSG Talent. It's the top 3 teams at this point of time in the league. We play against HQ. We went for Ragnar 3. Once again, top jungle communication. This is something that I was not able to address throughout the split, and you would see that this comes back to bite us. Oof, in so many times. But play Nidhi Renekton into the Mordekaiser matchup. Epic's understanding is that we wanted to dive the Mordekaiser. Shinsekai wanted to freeze the wave. They didn't communicate this, and all that happened was that at the end of everything, once again, hindsight is 2020, but it's this hindsight based off analysis where one player comes up and tells the player in a very I wouldn't say passive aggressive way, but rather non-constructive way. I told you so. I do not want to be diving with Mordekaiser. I just want to freeze the lane against him. And to which my response is, why didn't you tell him that before the game? And his idea is, as a jungler, he should know. The game against J-Team, we lost to Nesties in the mid, right? Nesties the mid laner for J-Team. They played Nunu mid. We went for a wombo combo type team composition, right? So at this point in time, we want to simplify the game plan. Go down there, play for the neutral objectives, breach for the weak side, make sure at 1 minute the wave is pushed either to neutral or +1 depending on what the opponent's top lane is. Group for mid lane, play for mid prio, control the choke points for neutral objectives and play for it. And I think we did it fairly well. It's just that once again, the laundry list in terms of understanding how to play neutral objective team comps wasn't really there. We mismanaged our ability to control the bot side river in one of the key fights, and despite us taking a wombo combo fight to get back in the game, despite us being snowballed on super hard early, we throw what could possibly have been a 1 game for us. PSG Talent, we went for Senna as a kind of team composition, right? This is scaling, strong team fighting, and I think that once again, this is small individual mistakes that cost us the game, because we got the Baron in this game, but I think Quake walks up, hits the turret 1 too many times, eats the Zoe bubble, and they pick us off and they snowball the game from there. Well, I'm gonna be honest, right? Like, while we continue to be outclassed by the tier one PCS teams individually, these games actually felt close to winning from a macro perspective. It felt like the team was actually making progress, and it showed in our scrims to a certain degree as well, right? So it should say week 6 and week 7, right? Week 6 scrims actually did fairly decently. Week 7 scrims is when we played against some of the lower table teams at the point of time. So week 7 comes around, we play against Nova. I think this one could have been my fault, right? It's not could have been my fault. I'm pretty sure it's my fault in the draft. I changed the plan at the last minute. We opened the set, we give them the Callista, and I should have been clear at this point of time, right? That we needed a good answer to Callista. I thought a Maokai was a good answer. Shinsekawa didn't feel comfortable on it, but he passed it off. So we drafted the Maokai into it, and the Callista just pops off and carries the game anyways. Against Alpha, we went for the Gangplank Carter set combination, which is something that we had a lot of success with in scrims. And I think that we managed to score a win in this game, right? But it was after the Nova game where the team had a very long talk. I think Quake initiated it together with Boxer, right? Where we had a very long talk, where we went in there and for the first time instead of having conversations about, oh, I want to carry this game because I don't think this guy can carry it, or maybe this guy shouldn't be carrying and this other person should be carrying instead. For the first time, we were seeing concessions in terms of for the match day before Alpha and Leah, we were seeing concessions in terms of actually I can play tank champions, and this is what we need to do. This is the overall game plan. These are steps that need to be done, and I think it kind of helped that we did a very clear visualization exercise before these 2 weeks as well. We scored a win against Alpha, and against the up we put off a set up this carrying combination. Once again, I think that if we are able to reach a stable game state of sorts, the macro kind of like takes over. And we scored a win against the up. It was a kind of happy ending, right? Despite us absolutely crashing and burning within the split itself. To be able to end the split off on 2 wins, it was a rather happy. I wouldn't say happy ending, right? But it's a sweeter ending, it's a sweeter note of sorts to know that, okay, the process worked. Maybe if we had more time, things could have been fine. But it turns out that wasn't necessarily the case, because there were still a lot of problems that were not solved that resurfaced once we went into playing promotionals. We finished the season with 3 wins and 15 losses and in 10th place, which means that we had to play relegations. We had to play relegations against Impunity. And the approach for this, we took a 2-week break, right, after we finished this, so the players had some time to recover, some time to rest, and sometimes to refuel before we got back to the grind in preparing for this promotional match. We were going to pick 1-star master as well, right? We looked at the current meta and we said we're going to play for neutral objective team fighting. We're going to facilitate that by in the early game being able to push out the bot lane, secure the bot side scuttle crab, secure the drink, and then stack 4 dragons from there. Basically playing a neutral team fighting composition. The 2 weeks of scrims, it was actually a pretty decent win rate. Right. However, there was a significant regression in gameplay, and the teams that we were scrimming against were of much lower quality as well, as most of the other teams, they were no longer available. And as the players, they claimed to be burnt out, the practice hours also as scrims, it went down. It went down by quite a lot. In our scrims, I identified 3 areas of weakness, which I was able to address 2 of them. And there were 3 reasons why we were losing the 33 games of scrims across the 2 weeks, right? The first was that bot was unable to secure a push for Crab. So I got the ball in the sit down, then we just went through all the 2v2 matchups with them, and we fixed that. After all, I do consider myself a bot lane expert of sorts. The other is that where we get cheese level 1, and this is Lilia versus Graves, right? Or Lilia versus Hackrim setups, or Hackrim versus Graves kind of setups, where people are just going to be invading Raptors. So what we did was that I got the players, I assigned them, okay, you're going to find 3 level 1 strategies, and then we're going to do a team sharing and team presentation, and we're going to figure out what are all the ways and reasons why people do these various types of level 1s. However, similarly, Shinsekai was not the most receptive to his coaching, so I wasn't able to address the scenarios in which where he ran it down, other than simply responding onto him after a bad game of Scrim. Like, okay, hey, you really ran it down this game, and he says, okay, yeah, my bad. I'll win to the next time. Right. Let's move on to the games. First game. Pretty standard affair. We don't get a lot of leads through laning itself. In fact, there was a laning mistake in the bottom lane that sets us behind. But a superior macro takes over the game, where we play for complete rotation in the bottom side of the map, while the opponents play on 3 lanes. So we play a pick style, we collapse on one side, and the opponent Camille is caught with his pens down, still farming in the top lane. We win the first game in rather dominant fashion. Before all of this, I did tell them that we are up against an amateur team, and what I wanted the team to do is not to play for individual glory, but to play to show them the difference between a professional team and an amateur team. I thought the game 1 kind of achieved that. However, game 2, this is where disaster started to strike. The opponents did a bamboozle of sorts, right? They picked Silas and Arela and they lane swapped it. And once they had the wrong rune setup, Shinsekai got killed in the top lane, got solo killed in the top lane. He bought the wrong items, buying double bombing Cinder, and on top of being 50 CS down, or 70 CS down to the Silas, the gap in the top lane was a little bit too big to recover, despite bot lane being able to set up for dives well, and our jungler being a hit in general. The second game was lost. The third game comes around once again. Top lane and jungle communication. Once again, there's the whole form of hindsight analysis at the end of the game, which is very upsetting to see. But how this mistake happens. Graves, Epic, sees the opponent Kha'Zix eating his Crocs. He lets his top laner know, okay, the Kha'Zix is a jungler, can we kill him? Shinsekai uses that as Epic calling him over to go kill the Kha'Zix. There's a big wave stacking into him at the moment. He has the option to simply freeze it against the Vladimir. He simply walks through this big wave, eats all this free damage from Vladimir, walks over to the Kha'Zix and dies, losing the big wave in the process. The Ryze ends the game. He takes the counter pick of Ryze on the Vladimir, and he ends the game 3, 9, and 1, after we swapped over to red side for game 3. We go down 1-2 in the series. I regrouped the team, and I tell them, let's not forget what we're trying to do. Push bot, get the bot crab, secure the Drake, and stack 4 dragons. Now that we have left with no lives, the team they play in a much more reserved manner for the 4th game. Craig, on Senna, he steps up big. He can start to feel the fatigue of playing a best of 5 series starting to come into play, where people start to go on autopilot mode. He repeatedly reminds the team what is it that we should be looking for, and puts up an 8-10 performance on the Senna to help us win game number 4. Game number 5, once again, push bot and get bot crab. The fatigue once again sets in, and one too many mistakes has happened at this point of time. We successfully push out the bot side crab, but a communication mistake between the AD and support leaves them stranded in an awkward position, where they are unable to continue to push out the bottom lane, so that they can safely help Epic secure the 315 bot side scuttle safely. They get engaged on, as they whiffle waffle on the bottom side of the river, deciding whether or not they should be warding the Hackrim's blue buff. We get engaged on, we split the fight, we split the calls, and we lose the fight, committing a TB for this. Knowing that we get outskilled in this game, not being able to secure the first bot side scuttle crab, I knew at 3 minutes in this game, we were going to get relegated. The 5th game happens without much of a fight after this mistake, and we lose the series 2-3. On 8th September 2020, Resurgence was relegated from the PCS. So what went wrong? If I'm going to break things down to my 4 domains of coaching, knowledge, performance, relationships, and systems, and the knowledge domain, individual laning was a very clear factor. What did a laner need to succeed, especially in the top lane, was something that was not necessarily clear. Performance-wise, I think that there was a strong mentality, or rather was a very bad mentality from my part as well, where we were happy to settle for less. On top of that, there was a lack of focus in terms of strategy. If I had a better diagnosis of what this team was going to be like, there probably would have been a greater amount of focus in terms of not trying to try so many styles and just letting say maybe 2 styles or even say 1 style from the get-go, so that there will be a higher amount of focus. And I'm not providing the players with a form of analysis paralysis. In the relationships department, there was a lack of trust towards the teammates to fix their problems. And I think more severely, the goals of each player were severely misaligned on this team. Everybody claimed that they wanted to make it to the World Championship, some more so than others. Some wanted to make it to the World Championship, but they would rather spend their evenings texting and chasing after goals rather than putting the grind in to fix solo queue. And in the case of one player, where we had the bench, he would rather spend the time playing veteran with his friends rather than putting the time in to learn a champion where he said that, oh, I think this champion is really OP. Systems wise, how the players communicate within the game to share information with their teammates to form a plan is something that could have been implemented more on as well. And on the macro perspective, player evaluation and replacement was too slow. Simply too slow and too little. I think this kind of ties into my attachment towards the players. However, the biggest problem was there's an insidious culture of blame aversion within the team itself. Players did not feel empowered to take responsibility. Criticism was seen as personal. There was a reliance on staff to solve problems for them rather than collaborate to figure things out. And despite that, there was a lack of trust and the strategies prescribed. And the players did not have the courage to express that sentiment. How could I have done things better? I think there's 5 big takeaways for myself in this. The first is that I should never settle for less. I needed to catch on to the cultural problem more quickly and diagnose this. I caught myself saying in some of the conversations that with other coaching staff, I knew that X was a problem, but I'm going to work around it anyways. Such compromises in the future is probably not going to be it's definitely not going to be acceptable. Second thing I could have done better player diagnostics in terms of scouting, in terms of evaluating player performance. During this split, all I did was just do one-on-ones to check in with them. Okay, this is the mistakes that you're making. Do you need any help? Perhaps enforcing worksheets and quizzes and being more proactive with the visualization exercise that I did before week 6 would have been a much better way of assessing players, right? Creating team-based learning activities beyond scrims. I think that one of the more successful things that we did towards the end of the split is when I gave the players homework to do. And it's upsetting to know that some of the players didn't do it anyways because they didn't see it's important or they just simply wanted to just go through the motions of it. But for the players that engage, namely Epic, Boxer, and Quake, it proved to be a very good team-based learning activity for them and allowed them to put their heads together to kind of problem solve as well. I think in terms of tackling the culture of blame aversion, encouraging and rewarding players for identifying mistakes and taking the necessary steps to correct them is something that needed to be done as well. And I think that partially I needed to address expectations that I have all the answers as well. I think maybe part of the problem was that the players expected me to know the answers. And that's why they kind of like gave over agency for me to figure things out and prescribe the strategies for them. And of course, with everything being online due to COVID, providing more opportunities for engagement between teammates is something that we could have done more as well. And reading through HR sources as well as company culture books, right? They always talk about sharing stories as a very effective way of engaging people. And one of the things that I really want to try next time is to start each day by getting players to share stories. Say maybe it could be a bad beat story, or it could be a game where they carry it, but share a story from solo queue, something interesting, anything to help them get engaged in the game on not just a logical level, but on an emotional level with the rest of the team. And perhaps another way is to have a multi-way, how can I help you kind of conversation, so that we encourage players to reach out to their teammates and help one another. This is another change that I'll probably make, right? And the day debrief that I was currently doing is that I will do a recap of all the big learning points that we had, and then I'll ask each player what's one thing that we learned today. probably in the future, I'm going to be more focused on this cultural aspect. Not only am I going to recap the major learning points and get the players to reiterate one important thing that they learned today, I want them to also be able to share one thing that they can help their teammate with. And this can be as simple as dual queuing. This can be as simple as watching a VOD together. And one thing that they do not fully understand yet. So they are given a space, a safe space, to acknowledge weakness. This is what a timetable will probably look like, right? So the one on top that you're looking at as well, timetable look like for this split. I adopted the European style scrims where we would scrim five games in the afternoon, and the night time will be given for the players to play solo queue. As I suggested, the day would start with a team sharing. We'll play scrims, we'll do the team dinner, and nighttime will be activities where I'll do either more one-on-ones, conduct visualization exercises, and at the end of match days on Saturdays, there'll probably be a team activity as well. As to what this team sharing will consist of, I'll probably let the players choose one from these. You can either have a story share a story about your solo queue game from the previous day, share about the new concept that you learned, a game that you watch, and something that we as an entire team can learn from it, or something that you messed up and what you would do to prevent in the future. And I think that if I know hindsight is 2020, right? But these are the important things that I'm going to take ownership of this loss. And I think that this is a very important lesson for me as a coach to look at the cultural challenges that a team can have. And I think that Singapore is a very interesting place because you have a very good mix of the Asian style of passivity and you don't have the same work ethic that the countries like say Korea or Taiwan have, or say China have, where they kind of very misguided way of doing things, but they say that okay, my teammate's running it down, I'm gonna play 20 more games of solo queue so that I can try to fix that. And this gives me very good insight in terms of how am I gonna tackle cultural problems in the future. And I think that if I do get an opportunity to continue coaching, if this split, while being an absolute disaster results wise, is something that I can take a very important lesson in terms of these are the red flags culturally that I should be looking out for, the language that people have in terms of recognizing what's a toxic blame aversion kind of thinking that's existing, and what are the steps that I can do to tackle this in the future. That wraps it up for this video. Thanks so much for staying with me for this journey. It has been a very difficult time, or to be honest, to look at what is the biggest failure in my career thus far. But I think that is what it is about, right? To own your mistakes, look at it and say that this is what I'm going to do in the future to prevent this from ever happening again. I do not look for forgiveness in all of this because there's nothing to forgive. I only seek improvement and a better tomorrow. Thanks for watching this video. And as always, do leave a like and do subscribe if you enjoy my content.